If you have osteoporosis, you've probably heard that caffeine, soda, and sugar are bad for your bones. They weaken them. But do they really? Let's look at what the research has to say. Here's what you can expect to learn in this video. First, we'll discuss why people think that caffeine, soda, and sugar weaken bones. Then we'll see why the differences between short-term research and long-term research. Before we jump in, who am I? My name is Igor. I'm the author of the Amazon best-selling book called Osteoporosis Reversal Secrets. As well, I run an online personal training company that specializes in osteoporosis reversal. I'm also not just a random guy on the internet with an opinion. I'm actually a personal trainer who works one-on-one with clients who have osteoporosis, and I've helped them reverse it. Like Darlene here, who had low bone mass as a result of chemotherapy, radiation, and estrogen blockers. She was able to turn that around. Laura, who had a long family history of osteoporosis and got it herself, she was able to straighten her bones significantly. And Anne, who got osteoporosis despite being active, eating healthy, and was able to improve her bone density as well. So let's jump in. Why do people think that caffeine, soda, and sugar weaken bones? Well, let's talk about sugar first. Here is a study that justifies it. It's titled Excessive Fructose Intake Causes what you're looking at is vitamin D dependent inhibition of intestinal and renal calcium transport in growing rats. That's a mouthful. Basically, here's what this study found. Excess fructose results in calcium loss in urine and less vitamin D activity. Here's another one. Um, a study that contradicts that, interestingly enough. The conclusion from this study that actually studied people, not rats, is that the amount of sugar consumed by the Chinese elderly did not pose any risk of bone loss and fracture. Moreover, high sugar intake of the elderly was associated with a low rate of all-cause mortality. In this study, sugar was actually good for them. It didn't say sugar caused a low rate of all-cause mortality, but it was associated with. How interesting and how contradictory to everything you hear out there in mainstream media. Then let's look at soda or carbonated beverages. The belief is that carbonation leaches calcium from the bones. Is that true? Well, here's a study titled Carbonated Beverages, Dietary Calcium, the Dietary Calcium to Phosphorus Ratio, and Bone Fractures in Girls and Boys. And here's, yeah, it said that it does indeed leach calcium from the bones. But there's a study that contradicts that. Carbonated beverage consumption and bone mineral density among older women, the Rancho Bernardo study. Here they found actually the opposite. Modest intake of carbonated beverages does not appear to have adverse effects on bone mineral density in older women. So, as you can see so far, for everything that says it's bad for the bones, there's another thing that says it's not bad. It's not good, but not bad. It's neutral. Lastly, let's look at caffeine. Caffeine is supposed to drain calcium and weaken bones. Here's a study that shows exactly that. Is caffeine a risk factor for bone loss in the elderly? And what they found is that after drinking coffee, more calcium is lost in the urine. So this backs up what we see here. On the other hand, here is a study that says the exact opposite. Effects of caffeine on bone and the calcium economy. They said it does show, sorry, doesn't show the opposite. It said that coffee inhibits the absorption of calcium. So two mechanisms by which caffeine could potentially weaken bones. But does it really? Here's a study titled Caffeine Intake Increases the Rate of Bone Loss in Elderly Women and Interacts with Vitamin D Receptor Genotypes. Here's what they found. This one is a little bit more nuanced. The researchers accounted for both the amount of caffeine and calcium that people consume per day and the results were different. Here's what they found. Caffeine is only a problem when it's consumed in high amounts. How much is high amounts? In this study, they found that high amounts is over 300 milligrams per day, which is approximately 3 cups of coffee. But by itself, that's not a problem. It's only when this high caffeine intake is paired up with low calcium intakes that's a problem. How low is low calcium? Below 400 milligrams per day. A far cry from the recommended 1200 milligrams, which by the way, I disagree with and I talk about in my other videos. So as you've noticed so far, there is a discrepancy. For every study that shows negative effects of something, whether it's caffeine, soda, or carbonated beverages, there is or sugar, the type of carbonated beverages, there's a study that completely opposes that and says it's not a problem at all. So why the discrepancy between short-term research and long-term research? There are a few different reasons for that. First of all, diets are complex. We don't eat the same thing in isolation. We combine foods. For example, we might drink coffee with milk or cream. In research, they have to isolate. That's kind of the discrepancy between short-term research and long-term research, between nutritional science where you have to isolate variables versus how people live in real life. To isolate variables means you're conducting good science, and yet it's also not generalizable to the way people actually live in their life. And in life, we don't really isolate variables. The second reason for the discrepancy between the short-term research and the long-term research is that the reductions in calcium absorption may be tiny. Maybe, yes, it does reduce calcium absorption, maybe it increases bone loss or calcium losses, but by such a tiny amount that it makes no difference to the fracture risk. Lastly, some of these are animal studies. There's a difference between what you see in animals versus what you see in people. The research on sugar is actually from rats, and rats aren't people. In science, you can only generalize to the population studied. You know that excess sugar, especially fructose, is bad for rats. So if you have a pet rat, don't feed them sugar, they'll get osteoporosis. But if you're concerned about osteoporosis for yourself, it's not exactly a health food, but don't worry about it too much. Now, right now we're just myth busting, but if you want to go deeper, I've created a special video, which by the way is not available on YouTube. This is a Stronger Bones checklist. It's 6 steps to improve bone density naturally. You can find that on your screen right now, as well as in the description below.